Trump's trade wars will end. Pause not. Shout out Borat.
Welcome to On Deadline, the Washington Examiner's political game show. I'm Tianalo Desher.
And I'm Christian Daytok.
Each week we discuss the latest news and we give our opinions on it. You get to vote with whom you agree. Don't forget to like, subscribe, share with your friends, but most importantly, comment with who you think won. This week we begin above the fold. Christian, what's the top story you've been following this week?
Tragedy struck the nation again this weekend as we saw some of the deadliest flooding in a century descend on central Texas. Now, I don't think Donald Trump is to blame for the flood itself, but he has acted in a way that specifically exacerbated the deadliness of this disaster. I want to talk about Doge for a second because the way that Donald Trump and Elon Musk, RIP, took a chainsaw to the federal bureaucracy instead of a scalpel potentially undercut some of these life-saving technologies and programs that the federal government runs in cooperation with state and local partners. But even more importantly, for the better part of a decade, Donald Trump has consistently downplayed how deadly natural disasters can be. And it wasn't even when he was president the first time around. This occurred on the campaign trail in October. We consistently heard about how FEMA was not only not helping people, they were specifically going out of their way to leave Trump voters out to dry. Look, this type of rhetoric, again, it won't actually specifically save people's lives. We have no evidence of that. But it certainly undercuts public trust in government programs in a time when people need to know that they can trust the powers that be. It's a terrible situation, Tiana. And I just want to think that maybe this will be the last time and both parties will start acting, responsibly and thinking about people across the country when they start using this type of language to demonize FEMA and other, important groups like that.
So my understanding is that the Guadalupe River Valley, historically, going back the centuries of data that we can surmise, it's always been at very horrible risk of flooding. We know weather in Texas is just always crazy. So the good news, and this is no cold comfort for the victims and the families of victims, is that the fatality rate of Texas floods has actually declined by 2/3 in the past 75 years. Again, maybe 100 people have died, so that is not exactly comforting to them. Where there was a strategic failure, it seems that it is not at the federal level, but at the local level. So Wired magazine, which is by no means conservative, they aggregated from a bunch of meteorologists and experts in the field. They concluded that the National Weather Service actually did do its job in Texas. One of the biggest issues is that big flash flood warning, National Weather Service put that out at 1 a.m. But the city and county Facebook pages, fire department, law enforcement, they did not even begin posting until 5 a.m. or later. There was the city itself, where that housed the camp, I don't think they posted until past 7 a.m. That being said, I think the level of trust that people have in these institutions, that is an issue. I don't think Trump bears any responsibility for the local governments not posting to their pages, what the federal government got correctly. That being said, I think we saw a bipartisan demonstration of just really gross behavior on Twitter over the weekend.
Yeah, without a doubt.
We saw, yes, there was one local Democratic lawmaker who said something gross about this area voted for Trump. So you get what you ask for. But then I also did see MAGA people on Twitter. There was one man who was trying to get back from France because his daughters were at the Christian girls camp and they saw their friends floating away from them. Obviously this horribly traumatic time. He's trying to get back into the country to find his family. And some of the comments were that's what you get for abandoning your children. It's they're at summer camp. Have some empathy. These parents are going through probably one of the most traumatic experiences you can possibly go through as a parent.
They are. And look, I don't want to sound too Chicken Little crying that the sky is falling. Hand up. There's nothing that Trump could have done to prevent the flood, right? He's not God. He's not dictating the weather. But I do think he bears responsibility for the words that he chooses, especially in areas where, some of these people have been left behind by both Republican and Democratic, governments in the past. And if you're looking at someone like Trump, who is an outsider, he is a barrier breaker in terms of sort of getting non-political folks invested in politics. His words certainly matter. And the way he had talked about FEMA in October of last year on the ground in North Carolina about how they're useless and they're political.
In the wake of this horrible storm, many Americans in this region felt helpless and abandoned and left behind by their government. And yet in North Carolina's hour of desperation, the American people answered the call much more so than your federal government, unfortunately.
Like that's certainly not helping the situation. And just to put a pin in it, really, I mean, I don't want to go down the global warming angle, but like Kerr County, Texas, the place where we are, I think this is one piece of anecdotal evidence that sort of supports what I'm trying to say. They have known that their warning systems, both analog sirens and like digital, distribution networks, are not up to snuff. They've been saying that for, and again, this is coming out from reporting in the last several days, they've been saying this for the better part of a decade. But when you have someone who comes into office who is overwhelmingly, has the support of your community, again, I'm talking about Kerr County, Central Texas, and then they decide to do something like, oh, we don't need to modernize our alarm system because it seems a little bit much. That's like a direct quote from a county official when they have known that this has been a problem for years. I think the stance that the president is taking and the language he chooses to describe this issue is certainly influencing that type of thinking. And ultimately, natural disasters are like one of really the only issues in the world which should not be political.
Yes.
They kill people regardless of whether or not you're in a democracy, whether or not you're in a Republican or a Democratic state.
They don't care how rich you are. They don't care how poor you are.
No, not at all. And I think we have to be honest about how we approach this problem. Otherwise, people will continue to die like those, nearly 40 young girls at a summer camp. I mean, I think something that's being lost in this entire discussion of this conversation is that, yes, this is one of the most deadly floods in a century, but it's maybe one of, if not the deadliest incident for children in America ever. So I don't want to, belabor this point, but let's try and be better and learn from this situation is how I think I'd like to end it. That being said, I know you've got a different story on your mind. So what's cooking over there in Tiana land today?
Elon Musk supported Barack Obama in 2008, 2012, Hillary Clinton in 2016, Andrew Yang, then Joe Biden in 2020, and then Ron DeSantis in 2023. Since he backed Donald Trump after the Butler assassination attempt, Elon Musk has gone through a crash course 1-year life cycle of being a Tea Party Republican. After beginning to feud publicly with Donald Trump and then threatening to primary Republicans that voted for the One Big Beautiful Bill signed into law on the 4th of July, Elon Musk has now said he will launch the America Party. Its primary goals will be to reduce debt, responsible spending only, free speech, less regulation across the board, especially in energy. That would be called being a Tea Party Republican. But there's one issue. Elon is coming into the exact same crisis, the third rail of politics, entitlements, that has plagued every single Tea Party Republican, right? During the last fiscal year, 2 out of every $3 collected by the federal government went to Social Security, Medicare, and entitlements. And until you back a politician who is willing to touch Social Security and Medicare, you will never overcome this issue. And that's why Elon Musk, he could have in 2023, he could have backed Nikki Haley, who was the only major GOP candidate who was saying, yes, we do need to increase the Social Security retirement age. No, he decided to back Ron DeSantis, who said, I'm not touching either of those programs. And then Donald Trump, Donald Trump has never been a debt hawk.
No.
So I have sympathy for Elon, but he's gone through the political transformation that I think the rest of us went through as Tea Party teenagers.
Sure.
If you're a Republican of a certain age.
There's two things that jump to mind immediately for me in this whole Elon Musk America Party, thing that he's putting out there on Twitter, on X, formerly known as Twitter. Don't sue me, Mr. Musk. But The first and foremost is it's so funny how rich people respond to not getting exactly what they want. And he is the ultimate illustration of this. He's the richest person in the world. And like by all means, he benefited tremendously from his short stint in the Trump government.
Yeah.
I'm talking about billions and billions of dollars in SpaceX contracts and other technologies and whatnot. But the other thing I, am seriously questioning is how serious is he really about all of this? Because on the one hand, I can see where he's coming from. And I think you are right. I think he was disillusioned with how government operated and maybe even how unified the Republican Party was. But is this just a money-making scheme? I mean, we heard about Third Way last year. We've heard about, folks trying to launch new third parties, the Green Party, Cornel West, whatever he's doing these days. And Vermin Supreme, who's run for president, I think, every year, in the last 4 decades, something like that.
My name is Vermin Supreme. I am a friendly fascist. I am a tyrant that you should trust, and you should let me run your life, because I do know what is best for you. Yes, I am a politician. I will promise you anything your little electorate heart desires.
But
where does Jill Stein go every 4 years?
Yeah. Elon doesn't really have any skin in the game. Certainly not from a purely political theory standpoint. I mean, obviously he has business interests, but is he really trying to institute, some type of generational shift in the two-party system? Or is he just out there to have something that he can throw money into and that will generate revenue on its own because people are interested in it? Because I do think he is correct in that both parties have sort of lost sight of what they're supposed to be doing for voters, right?
Oh, no, again, this is why I start off with I'm very sympathetic to him, right? I fundamentally, a party that actually focused on reducing the debt, free speech, and energy deregulation. Yes, 100%.
It's like your dream.
Yeah, this is my dream. But you know whose dream that also was? Paul Ryan's. I mean, I think this is part of the issue. Think about when we were discussing One Big Beautiful Bill. We were talking about Medicaid provisions, not Medicare, Medicaid provisions, work requirements for able-bodied, prime-age adults without dependents younger than 14 years old, with major exceptions for if you were in addiction, recovery, or had some sort of disability. And we could barely get half the Republican caucus to vote for it, right? Kicking illegal immigrants off of Medicaid. That was almost too controversial. So if that is the level of bedwetting we deal with on the right, we're not increasing the Social Security retirement age. And we all know how this ends. This ends with Social Security becoming insolvent probably in the next 7 years, which means an across-the-board 24% benefit cut, and Medicaid or Medicare insolvency a couple years after that, right? Because you just can't keep on doing this. At a certain point, you can't spend this much and have a birth rate this low. And then, if you stop legal immigrants that come into the country and pay taxes, especially the high-skilled ones that pay a lot in taxes, that's a real issue. So I would hope that Elon would use his incredible influence and incredible wealth to, at the end of the day, it's a voter problem. You have to try educating.
Yeah, no, I agree with you entirely. I think, luckily for us, this is going to be a big issue heading into the 26th primary. So we're going to have plenty of time to talk about it over the next year and a half. But in the meantime, it's time for us to play Yays and Nays, a segment where we go head-to-head and vote on other big news this week.
The FBI file release will put Epstein conspiracies to rest.
This is tough. I'm going to say it should put them to rest, but it's not going to, for obvious reasons.
I'll take the affirmative.
Okay.
Because I think it's harder.
Go for it, Mr. Optimism.
So, if you think about the entire incentive structure of the timeline of Jeffrey Epstein and his arrest, his death, and the fallout.
His second arrest.
Right? We'll get into that non-prosecution agreement in a minute. The incentive structure has been that anyone who had access to these files had reason to reveal anything inculpatory that they could, right? So originally, Donald Trump, he gets access to these files during the arrest. Theoretically, if there was evidence of Bill Clinton cavorting with the underage, sex trafficking victims themselves.
Yeah.
not just like the weird massage, creepy behavior, but like actually like engaging in sex crimes, why would Donald Trump have not just released it? His first labor secretary, Alex Acosta, was the original prosecutor that brokered the non-prosecution agreement in 2008 that gave Jeffrey Epstein, despite all this ample evidence, they had him dead to rights. Instead, he spent 13 months in jail where he basically had unlimited entry-exit position. So Alex Acosta had to resign as labor secretary. Then you have Donald Trump, every incentive to leak if there was, Bill Gates, Bill Clinton, all the
usual
for the right.
suspects, right?
Then you have Joe Biden take over. If there was a smoking gun about Trump, if Elon Musk was right when he said Trump's in the Epstein files, why wouldn't Joe Biden have used that in the election he was running, right? Then you have Trump take over again, and the Attorney General of the United States that's releasing all these, she was the Attorney General of Florida from 2011 to 2019. So she could have gone after Epstein, but didn't. So I think it just comes down to like the banality of conspiracy theories, however harmful the conspiracy theories themselves are, they actually come from a very human instinct to want to rationalize the injustices of the world, right? Something like this, you need to justify how was this serial monster predator able to get away with this for decades and decades and decades? And the answer is because the system lets most serial sex offenders get away with this for decades and decades and decades. Look, like, according to 2023 FBI data, only 12% of rapes reported to the police and an arrest.
That's very low.
And out of 1,000 sexual assaults, only 25 perpetrators will be convicted and serve time behind bars. So this is the norm. And so I think the conspiracy theories originally happened because people couldn't believe the system could be this bad. And now I think, no, they understand it actually is just this bad. Like Jeffrey Epstein was obviously uniquely a comic book villain because he had the wealth and he had the powerful friends, but like this is the norm.
I actually don't really have much to add to that except to say you're wrong entirely. I think, no, look, what you're saying about how the evidence, bore itself out during both the Trump administration, V1, and the Biden administration, I think is totally correct. But I think your point about how misinformation spreads like wildfire just underlines how, the DOJ coming out and very publicly saying Jeffrey Epstein did not have this secret black book of people he had blackmail on. He did kill himself. That's not going to stop the people on the internet, first and foremost, because a lot of these people make money off of pushing these rumors and stuff like this. I think a quick scroll down X, formerly known as Twitter, Monday morning would have showed you that the people pushing these conspiracies, for the most part, have not been deterred by what the DOJ came out and said over the weekend. I think ultimately, and again, we sort of touched about, on this at the beginning, words matter, right? Especially in the internet age, especially with someone who, and some of the Democrats out there might take issue with this, someone who is as charismatic as a Donald Trump. And I'm not saying Donald Trump was, pushing Jeffrey Epstein conspiracy theories, because he actually, I'll give him credit for this, when Epstein was first ran afoul of the law in the early 2000s, Donald Trump straight up kicked him out of Mar-a-Lago. He was like, you're persona non grata. And look, I just think we cannot expect facts and the truth to adequately inform how people behave online. I mean, the last 15 years have told us that. Like, truth certainly plays very little into issues like this, especially, issues that are automatically wrapped up in secrecy because they're an FBI investigation and because foreign heads of state are involved and things like that. I think, and again, much in the same way that I hope we can learn, we, the collective American public, from the Texas floods about, how do we approach these issues? How do we talk about, tragedies and the such? Some people will be able to learn from how collectively America handled the last 10 years of the Jeffrey Epstein saga and move forward. And it's not like sex crimes are going to go away. And it's not like wealthy people getting out of punishment for crimes of which they've been convicted will go away anytime soon. And I just think it's a shame because once the cat comes out of the bag, you can't put her back in, right?
And now it's time to fill in the blank.
Trump's tariffs will end blank.
Oh.
They'll end with the Federal Reserve.
Okay.
Because if Trump wants rates to be cut, which the Fed has telegraphed that like the September meeting would be most likely, that requires there to be some level of stasis with the tariffs. It could be, you know, the ridiculous Liberation Day tariffs. Hopefully they're not. If you keep it at 10%, right? Like, if Trump said today, the tariffs are going to be 10% indefinitely, I think the Fed cuts at the Fed wouldn't wait until September. The Fed would cut at the July meeting. It's just a matter of the longer you protract this tariff war, the longer it would take for the actual effects of the effective tariff rates to work their way through the economy, and that just keeps on delaying things. And I think Trump wants rates cut more than he wants ridiculously punitive tariffs.
Okay. I'm going to take a slightly different angle, Tiana, and say that Trump's trade wars will end. Pause not. Shout out Borat. We're going to be doing this for the entire 4 years that Donald Trump is in office, mostly because I think Donald Trump himself doesn't really know what he wants. Let's take a step back and go back to January, which feels like a lifetime ago, but was really only 6 months or so ago, whatever. The White House and Donald Trump had said, look, these tariffs are necessary because, one, foreign governments have taken advantage of American business overseas. Two, we need to shore up critical industries where we have lagged on our manufacturing and refinement. We're talking about steel.
Yeah.
We're talking about chip procurement, everything that goes into modern technology, more or less. This middle ground where we found ourselves doesn't really seem to be going after either one of these things. Because let's talk about the two trade deals where we've actually seen the text. I'll call it a framework because I think text is being a little bit generous. Vietnam and the United Kingdom. The United Kingdom has a carve-out for steel tariffs. According to who? They have one refinery in the United Kingdom. There's no way that we can get enough steel to make up the gap between our procurement and our end line manufacturing ends. And I think Donald Trump is more interested in the chase than what actually comes at the end of it. I think given left to his own designs, he would probably put something around 30 to 40% on every single country and just be done with it. I mean, to his credit, again, Donald Trump has been a staunch tariff hawk for, this entire century, really.
Yeah.
His entire public career, even before he got into politics, he was talking about how unfair the trade relationships between the U.S. and our partners was. And I think we're just going to be doing this over and over and over again because he wants to pursue a tough tariff agenda, which his deputies, be it Scott Bessent or Howard Lutnick or Jamieson Greer, cannot negotiate because it fundamentally comes from a place outside of reality.
I want to bring up the courts here because I actually think the federal judiciary might have handed Trump a lifeline, and here's why. The original Trump tariffs that have been announced, varying levels, but just in terms of the breadth of what goods they would cover, they would be levied on 71% of imports. So you have roughly 29% of goods that are totally exempt, the majority being the USMCA tariffs, which means that most goods from Mexico and Canada are still not being tariffed, which is a good thing because those are lots of the agricultural goods and oil that we have no supplements for, right? If you don't get avocados from Mexico, you're probably not getting them from anywhere. But if the IEEPA tariffs are permanently enjoined, which I believe will be a Supreme Court question, only 16% of goods imports will be tariffed. So I don't see Congress, now that they have Big Beautiful Bill, right? There was a chance to codify, I think, a 10% universal tariff. That was discussed behind closed doors. But now that they don't need that pay for, I don't see Congress codifying universal tariffs of some capacity, right? If you want to do a China tariff could probably pass easily, right? But I don't see in the long run them wanting to have tariffs on 71% of imports, especially when the negotiations have been pretty fruitful in terms of, you can see in the Vietnam and the Vietnamese side of the ledger, it is 0 tariffs with a complete elimination of non-tariff barriers, right? They're saying, we'll take your meat, we'll take your produce, we'll take your GMOs and all of that, which is good because GMOs are good for you. So I just wonder with Trump, yes, on this issue, Trump is actually somewhat of an ideologue, but I still think Donald Trump's greatest strength is that he cares more about American greatness. Line goes up, stock market goes up, 10-year goes down, and those are the metrics he really understands because he was a successful businessman. So I think if you have the 10-year reward him for brokering better trade deals, I think he will respond to that incentive. We saw him backtrack once after Liberation Day. And so the question is, if this goes on for too long, if the Fed says, we're not cutting a damn thing until you give us more clarity, I think he'll buckle.
That's fair. I would note there was a July 9th deadline. That's tomorrow for the Trump administration to negotiate all of these deals, 90 deals in 90 days after the Liberation Day pause, according to Peter Navarro.
And we have 2.
And we have 2, and those goalposts have already been kicked down the line another month. Scott Bessent and Lutnick and Trump, to a lesser extent, confirmed on Sunday that we're now looking at an August 1 deadline. So can't wait to do this again in a couple of weeks. That being said, that's all the time we've got for this week. Don't forget to throw us a comment down below, subscribe to the channel, and share this video with your friends. I'm Christian Daytalk.
And I'm Tia Desher.
And until next week, go check out more of our great reporting at washingtonexaminer.com.